Hey, what is up everyone? It's Rich. All right, welcome to a new video. I had a lot of fun looking at that monthly sort of concept of what goes into a comic book that's released on a monthly schedule. So, literally the next day after I did the initial video, I liked the Mark Bagley recommendation, and I did about a 55-minute video. I didn't know it would be that long, but I went through, I think, 5 or 6 issues throughout his run of what seems to be about 111 issues that he did. There's a few after him, but I am going to upload that to Patreon later today. I need to edit it just a tiny bit, but I thought, let's do one for YouTube just in general. So what I did is I wanted to start early in the run and kind of see where it starts. I wanted to see where he gets more confident with the characters, and when you're in the deep water and maybe you're getting burned out and you could lose focus potentially. I'm not saying that he did. And then how do you end it? Like, do you end it on a high note? I mean, this is a this is a huge accomplishment. This guy, I mean, he's really the litmus test for someone doing a book for a company too, no less. This isn't self-published, which you can kind of maybe have a little bit of wiggle room with a publishing schedule. So let's do this. I had initially started with issue 4. Let's just start with issue 3 for this video. So this will be early in his run, but a couple of issues in, so he should be at this point working on a 4-week schedule. And sometimes they speed up. So I don't know if this is going to be already a fill-in issue. I don't know. Let's see what that means. Oh yeah, let me. I'm going to downsize these just so that they're a little easier to soak in on the screen. All right, so now this looks like Bagley. So the one interesting thing when I did the other video was every video that I actually, or every comic that I went through, actually had a different inker, and it was pretty incredible how much his work changed depending on who was inking it. The very first book that we looked at, to me, looked like he inked himself, and it was not great. And I think the level of detail in the comic suffered from it because his time was allocated now to 2 different jobs. And then Art T. Bear came on and did some fantastic work, and you could see not only did the quality of the finish amplify, but Mark was able to spend more time on subtleties and things like that. But again, this is not that much different than the Walker art, which it's fairly large shapes, and it's pretty direct. This is nice. This is definitely not his inks. This could be T. Bear. I don't know. I have no idea what that is. That the character? Maybe it's the character. I never read these, so. But yeah, we'll see. So again, big shapes. Not ridiculous detail. Like he's not drawing like ornate tiles, and I mean, it's like straight lines, a little bit of suggestion of detail in the background. These faces are very, very simple. Nothing is really overly rendered. Again, that's kind of one thing that you'll see is how I mentioned that all drawings have this sort of foundation. Anyone that draws comic books at some point has drawings that look like this. The guys that add a lot of detail will make a second, third, and maybe even fourth pass over things where they break things up more, they add more layers of rendering, and then sometimes even special effects. But the monthly guys, this is generalization, kind of just have a little bit of feathering coming out of the work. It's a little less rendered, and I'm not saying that you couldn't do more hatching, but yeah, again, big shapes. It's pretty simple. Oh, and someone had said, oh, well, graphic novels in Europe, are about a year they spend on them. But most graphic novels, there's a few things. I was aware of that, obviously, but way more panels. The stories are generally way more dense, and sort of, to me, those are like big budget movies. The art is more detailed, definitely more panels. European graphic novels almost always lean towards 13, 16, 18, 20 panel pages. It's we've looked through a couple, and it's a different style. I mean, this is probably a 2-page spread with 4 panels. I could see a European graphic novel having all these inset, smaller things. But there's always examples that would refute that. So again, not tons of rendering, a little bit of hatching here, but all this stuff looks pretty direct. You know, it's real solid. It was interesting. The first issue that I looked at, I don't know if it was issue 4. We'll see when we go back to the actual list itself, but it was okay. It was. I was like, oh man, this is going to be a little rocky. But once he wasn't inking himself, it just became actually way more interesting to see how solid the inkers were and how much they were able to really kind of ground this stuff. It's all there. I mean, he doesn't, again, he's like, this is just a suggestion of clothes. It's, the collar's there, but he's not going in and like rendering off things. There's not tons of folds. There's not folds and rendering on folds. There's not, excuse me, there's not a million shapes in his hair. And, yeah, it's just pretty cool. This is nice, So it'd be a tough shot. You read this in a script, and it's like all of a sudden you've got to do a high school basketball game or whoever they're playing, and you're going to have to draw the bleachers and people playing. I mean, he handles it well. He allocates his time very effectively to show you everything you really need to know. That it's Peter Parker kicking butt, and they're in a gym playing basketball. These faces are really solid. I'm telling you, like, different inkers, whoever inked this did a real nice job. It's very, very solid. But I think the different inkers were John Sabal, John Dell, there was Scott Hanna, Art T. Bear. I'm trying to think of who else. But it was really, really interesting seeing each inker work on this stuff. And you never know the circumstances of the deadline, too. That's another thing I always throw in is we take at face value that, like, oh, well, they probably did a page a day. That's not always the circumstances. Sometimes you'll get thrown sort of kind of crazy, like, you do, 4 pages by Monday morning, and it's Friday afternoon kind of thing. So you do have to kind of take that into account. But I was really happy that people were interested in this, because I think that it's just a different idea of drawing. We see Instagram and we see all this. I think it was issue 4. Let me just see for something for a second. Was the one yeah, this was the first book that I went through. But here, watch, check this out, just for a second so you can see it. Oh, well, maybe not. Was this it? I'm gonna go fast for 1 second. Just give me a sec. Right, do you see what I'm saying? How the inks are just quite different on this. It's not bad. The drawings are real solid, but it's a little more heavy-handed, and like there's like less of a nuance to it. And again, it didn't seem to list who did the inks on this issue. Doesn't really matter. It's it was a long time ago, and again, we don't know the real circumstances of it. But again, you'll see really, really. I mean, this is, I think, a good transition to whatever we see next. This almost has kind of like a Klaus Janson-y, like. I mean, these, like, or maybe someone that would have inked John Romita Jr. back in the day. It's pretty, like, it's quite bold. I'm assuming it's brush inking, but anyway. Okay, so we looked at issue 3. Now let's go into, oops, sorry, issue. Let's go up to issue 39. See what he was up to at issue 39. Therapy. Okay, so these are the names of the stories. I get it. Okay, and this will be Art T. Bear. Great. These two do quite detailed work together, and it's just those two. Yeah, see, look at this. Isn't this crazy? Look at the difference between what we just saw and this. I mean, that's great. Man, it's so crazy. You wouldn't even think it's the same penciler, almost. You know what I mean? Isn't that wild? And with Art inking him, not only is he getting a very refined finish on things, he's able to spend more time on the drawings and the little details. This looks like a stat. Someone had asked me about cloning things in their drawings. You want to be careful with it, but to me, this is a storytelling beat. It's like he turns on the light and he turns off the light, and it's kind of like, like it all is a moment, a fast moment, but yeah, see, God, it's so crazy. And wait do you see? The next issue will look completely different. More panels in this too, but still, um, from an inking point of view, these blacks would take a while. Like if it, depending on how you ink it, I generally outline a lot of my blacks and fill them in at the end, which is kind of, it can be a little tedious. But then if you fill them in as you go along, it feels like the panels take longer. So it's a weird thing. And then also you have to erase the page generally, and that can kind of tear up the inks. And obviously, if you ink digitally, you don't have to deal with any of that. But you don't have an original at the end. It's sort of the win lose on it. This is nice. And art is actually kind of capturing a little bit of the brushy feel that that other inker had, although I'm sure it's just more incidental because this is almost 3 years later. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Lots of panels in this. This looks like a stat. I'm not going to really worry about it, but again, it's kind of a storytelling thing. Yeah, this is nice. He kind of shrunk here a little bit. Like he goes from slightly cartoony to sort of realistic. It's like when he's referencing the Hitch sort of Nick Fury, it kind of, it sort of changes, but when he draws it on his own, he ends up looking a little more cartoony. This is solid, nice amount of detail. I mean, it's like a college dorm or some sort of dormitory kind of thing. I mean, it's like bunk beds, all the cues are there that let you know sodas and pizza, pretty typical stuff that 17 to 20-year-olds would probably have in their dorm room or whatever this is. And the guy's a bit of a slob. I mean, his butt's hanging out and stuff. This is nice. Yeah, there's a real magic to this. I mean, honestly, like some of my favorite artists that do really, really great work when they're given sort of like an infinite amount of time really do something special when they're actually under a deadline. It's a funny thing that like when they're out of their comfort zone, they actually do excellent work, but for whatever reason, they choose not to. And it's kind of a shame because it's like you almost feel like you're being denied. I think that there's a lot more interesting and creative drawings that go on in sequential art than cover art. And there's a couple of artists that come to mind immediately when I think of their covers versus what they do on the interiors, where it's like, I mean, they do good covers, but I actually think it's more interesting when they actually draw stories. But, it's not going to happen, so you just kind of have to sort of go, oh, well. This is nice. This is really good. He got much better with the lighting. He was putting a lot of heavy shadows on Peter Parker in the early issues, and it wasn't really like, they were a little heavy-handed, and it could have been the inks interpreting it that way. But this is more graceful, and I'm not noticing the weird anomalies. And this was another thing that I had pointed out in my other video was he keeps his buildings pretty simple with like he's not beveling edges and having really, really complicated. He does it a little bit here to mix it up, and like this is a little bit more of a complicated building, but generally speaking, he does sort of the ruled like lines, which is, it's an effective way to get the representation of buildings without going nuts. But filling in the blacks on this stuff, all these little windows and stuff like that, especially if you're doing it traditionally. I know you can just use the fill bucket in Clip Studio, but if you are working traditionally, this stuff will take a little time. Like something like this, it's beautifully done, man. Art is great. He's such a good inker. His work was very, very influential to me on steampunk. He had inked Chris on Uncanny X-Men. Okay, so let's go to. But I really like the way that it looks. So I always kind of in the back of my mind, I was kind of trying to get this cross between Mark Buckingham and kind of what Art did on Chris. I thought that he did a really nice job. So this is another Art Bear issue. Again, 7-panel page. Really no background to speak of in most of these panels. This stuff is pretty benign. Um, and yeah, it looks cool. It's all there. It's what you want. It's nice. Another 6-panel page. Just enough, no detail on the books. The bookshelves are pretty simple. They throw the little alien sticker in there, so you kind of know it's, probably, I guess, Peter's stuff. I don't know. Was Aunt May? Oh, is that Spider-Man? I don't even know what that. Maybe it's not. It looks like an alien head, but it's red, so maybe it's Spidey. That's a nice little drawing. There were some other good suggestions for monthly artists. I'm definitely going to check them out. And again, the reason that I thought Bagley in particular was interesting is because he had to do so many issues of this book that it's like, what was his endurance level? What was the evolution of the art? And this is very, very consistent. This is about 2 years later on this book from what we just saw, and it looks pretty much identical. So Bagley's really got his language down. This is nice. There was a little bit of Carlos Pacheco in some of his stuff that I had seen before. I don't notice it as much here, but Pacheco kind of maybe like right before this or kind of during this time was doing some real nice stuff at Marvel, and it was this nice blend of kind of cartoony anatomy and a little Alan Davis sort of stuff going on. This is nice. This is really good. He actually does an excellent Aunt May, I think. It's pretty consistent, and overall, like, she generally looks pretty cool. Some of this stuff reminds me, too, a little bit of John Romita Jr. Like, sort of the big head stuff. This is like that's a nice face. Yes, it's got like a little bit of a John Romita Jr. vibe. Even the hair. So do you think you could flex your muscles doing monthly work? Is it something that people out there are interested in doing? I am. I don't think that I would want to do 12 issues a year, but for me, in the back of my mind, the bar that I've always set for myself is, one, I want to be able to draw really well, and two, I want to be able to do somewhere between maybe 6 and 8 books a year. I think that that's a really good number because it keeps you out there. And it's like you can still kind of focus on quality, but it keeps you moving. I think that that's really important. The cardiovascular sort of movement. You're doing a page about every other day. The complicated thing for me is that there's a control freak element of that I want to ink this stuff myself, but honestly, if I was smart, I would probably get someone else to ink it, honestly, and then just focus on the storytelling and the drawing. This is not for Blaster Kid. I'm talking about like if I was going to do a run on something that it would be in my best interest to not ink it. But it's tough to let that go because it's kind of the final it's the final word on your like liner. All right, so let's go to issue 76. So 75 would have been like an event. We'll see if he can keep his focus. So now this is Scott Hanna. So we'll be very different. Scott's like a brush inker. So this is nice. This looks good. It's a little more organic, you'll find. Right now he's keeping it pretty in line with like it's probably brush inking, but it still has a contemporary feel. Yeah, again, very simple cars. They're solid though. These are nicely drawn. It's just there's not like he hasn't put a lot of detail. He's downplaying that. Spider-Man isn't always overly lit or overly detailed. He keeps the spaghetti webbing. I mean, that's that'll eat up time if you really are gonna do sort of like double line spaghetti webbing. It's gonna take some time. one thing that Bagley does with his buildings, this is not a great example, but it's a decent example, is it doesn't look overly ruled out. Like these are still pretty flat and at a pretty standard angle. But there's like a novice way that sometimes it will look, and sometimes like an appropriate way. He's kind of got like the nice balance where it leans into, it looks like a professional delivery and not super like homogenized. This is nice. Again, just enough room for you to know where they are. But again, it's all kind of straight on stuff. Just the suggestion of the car. Really no backgrounds on any of this. Again, all time savers, whether he's consciously doing it or not. He knows. McFarlane at one point had said, see how simple his spaghetti webbing is? It's way more doable. McFarlane had said one time years ago, I read it somewhere, that he would set like a stopwatch or a clock and basically give himself like an hour per panel. And he was penciling and inking himself though, but you know, if you work that way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and probably a couple of these panels wouldn't take an hour. So 7 hours, probably more like 6. And if you weren't inking yourself and you were a competent pencil, you probably could do it in 6 hours. Inking it would take longer. You've got all these little blacks to fill in, you know. All this stuff takes time, you know. This is a big piece. It looks small because we're looking at it kind of like, but if you had the 11 by 17 board in front of you, this is a lot of work. 2-page spreads generally will take me over 2 days. They take kind of like 2.5 and sometimes 3. For whatever reason, when stuff is spread out, covers are like that too. Like a cover can look kind of simple, but they end up taking more time than this kind of stuff. I don't know what it is, but you can have a panel to panel page that looks quite busy and move through the panels pretty effectively. This, you end up, well, especially inking, you end up waiting for ink to dry in all these like random little spots. And I work pretty methodically. Like I'll work in an area, then I'll work over here, and I'll work over here, and I'll work over here. And I rotate it so that while something's drying over here, I can be working down here safely and not smear. But ultimately, it ends up taking a long time. But, you know, like I could knock out a page like this in like four hours probably. Not filling in the blacks. The blacks would take another probably 45 minutes to an hour. But if I were to just ink this, I could do it real fast. I could probably do this in like an hour and 10 minutes, and this wouldn't take very long either. None of this is too bad either. Again, when you have the board in front of you, though, it can surprise you, and especially like depending on what the pencils look like. But again, simple buildings, no rendering, so you know, like a little bit of speed lines here. He's smart, you know, the guy's smart. Again, he turns this at just an interesting enough angle, and his building choices are varied enough that this works. This would be a template if you're going to do a really simple background of how to kind of do it effectively. This building looks a little different than this building. These look different. This has got its own kind of character. He's got them at just a slightly interesting angle, and it just doesn't look stock to me. It is and it isn't. It's like I said, this is appropriate stock. Nothing really too crazy here. Doors real simple. Nice shot. This is cool. Even the monster. I mean, the monster is more detailed than a lot of the stuff that he does. This is cool. Cool anatomy, you know. He's got his I call it cartoon or comic anatomy down though, but it's like he's got a way that he handles the musculature that's pretty simple. Like it's, you know, he boils this down to kind of like 1 or 2 kind of main ways he draws it. This is a certain way, this is a certain way, and he doesn't really mix it up that much. And that's how I had mentioned, I think in the other video, there was a guy that would come into Wildstorm and could knock out a page really, really effectively. Generally speaking, if he came in at 9, he was done by 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and he would have a real nice page done, probably at a level of detail a little bit more than this. And he had all this stuff down. He knew, I draw an arm this way, it's the way I draw it, this is the way I light stuff, and he just didn't dick around. You know, there wasn't this kind of exploring spirit in his work. You know, again, it's not a negative thing. It's like you have to have your go-to. You know, these type of artists are easier to study from too. Honestly, like if you were going to try to learn from comics, it can sometimes be useful. So let's go now to like 94. And this one is John Dell. Okay, this is going to be great. John Dell is fantastic. He's so good on Mark Bagley. It's okay, and Mark McKenna. So, yeah, I did notice was interesting. The other issues that John Dell worked on that I happened to hit on when we went through the other stuff, he didn't do full issues, and I don't know if that means that he's a little bit slow. But man, John Dell and Mark Bagley look really, really good together, in my opinion. I don't know if this is Dell. I can't tell from this particular things. His stuff is very lush and really, really solid. There was quite a contrast too in the book that we were looking at, because the other inker was Jonathan Sabal, who's really good, but works in kind of more of a like a Top Cow or Extreme kind of style, and so it was more his stuff was more linear, and Dell was more brushy and solid, and it just looked really good. A lot of small panels in this one, and it's pretty busy. Again, this starts to get a little bit of that Carlos Pacheco vibe that I was talking about. And Pacheco did a really long run on a book called, oh man, will I remember it? Oh, what was it called? It was a Marvel book. He did like 12 issues of it. Damn, what was it? I can't think of it. But it was pretty good. Not as good as his he did some Wolverine stuff. I don't know if it was for X-Men. Had Wolverine in it, and like the Bruce Lee looking character. It was really cool. Yeah, this is nice. I like when he draws this way a little bit more. This almost at times has a what's his name? He kind of draws like J. Scott Campbell. Bradshaw. What's his first name? Nick Bradshaw, maybe? Nick gets pretty detailed. He's pretty into Art Adams now. He kind of went from Campbell Arms. This is really good. I like this. Honestly, I like the sizes the size relationships. They don't look as childlike as some of the other stuff, but that is really, really cool too. This is definitely Dell, or looks to be. It could be McKenna. I could be wrong, but this looks like Dell to me. But Dell really makes his stuff solid. Man, yeah, this stuff is so cool. This starts to teeter a little bit, for my taste, a little bit too much into the cartoony look. But this is a pretty nice median. The characters start to look young sometimes when you get that look. Like, this guy looks like age appropriate. And this is nice too. Yeah, I think that guy's name is Nick Bradshaw. I was thinking this is cool. And this could be McKenna. This looks a little more rough. This is nice though, man. This is pretty busy. This stuff takes a long time. This is like I have Finch flashbacks, because David really, really puts a lot of rubble in his drawings. If you've got a team doing something, there's gonna be rocks, and lots of them. Sometimes, honestly, I would spend hours on rocks. Not even kidding. The characters would take less time than the rocks. This is really good. This is really good. I'm impressed. That's nice. This is really good. What is Mark Bagley working on now? Let me know, because I'm not really sure. This is cool. This is a nice ender. And this is nice too. I mean, it is cartoony, but that works for me. This is where like it starts to drift into that other thing a little bit more. Yeah, it can get a little. It's a little tiny bit inconsistent at times, but it's, you know, this is really detailed. Man, it's a lot of work. Man, Bagley was a hard worker. He's man. Whew. Okay, well, then let's move into the hundreds, and we'll do 111 is his last issue. Let's do. I'm like, what issue did I pick last time? Well, I'll try 108. Let's see what 108 is. Okay, I don't remember this. Mark Bagley, Hennessy. I think Hennessy is the inker, and then Justin Ponsner on colors. Right. This was the issue that I picked before. It's funny. I knew I would do that. It's like you try not to. It's like the magician thing. Pick a card. You're like, I'm not going to pick the card that this guy wants me to pick. And then you do. Hennessy. Okay. Yeah, this is a lot of work. He'll mellow it out though. This is another thing that you can do is you can allocate a lot of time to like a key spread like this, and then if you've got some talking head pages like later, sort of move through those quicker. This is all really nice though. Great pose. And we'll even look at 111. We'll see his swan song on it. This is nice. It's still pretty detailed. Again, it's got a little bit of that Hitch thing. It's funny because when he references Hitch, his stuff immediately gets even a slightly different structure. How funny! This is the other frickin' book that I went through on the other video. That's hysterical. All right, let's just move right to 111. Screw it. So this should be his last issue, his farewell. The talk. Stuart Immerman. Okay, so Stuart came in and did it. Okay, so Mark only did 2 through 11 and 18 through 22. Interesting. This is nice. Different colors. Man, that's very textury. And honestly, stuff like this is interesting. There's a few runs of artists that I like that did runs on books where the environments are really different that they ended up having to draw the stories in, or the colorist changes, or again, the inker changes. And there's a level of kind of coolness to that variety. This is a lot of work, man. This doesn't look like a stat. It's damn close. He may have statted the pencils, but the inker definitely did two versions of it. This is nice. His Aunt May is pretty good, man. He gets her more times than not. This is really wild. This almost has like a little bit of a cell animation feel. Stuart Immelman's great too. That guy's a beast. I think this is Stuart. Yeah, God, Stuart Immelman's so good. We'll just look at these just for fun really fast. Man, that is a nice pose. This looks maybe like a trace photo, honestly, or like a Google SketchUp. Like, yeah, I'm a little skeptical on that. It's not a big deal, but I mean, he could have drawn them that way, but it has a little bit of these are nice, man. His gestures are great. Damn, these are killer poses. I might, you know what? I need to look at more Stuart Immonen. I really like his work a lot, and it's funny because he falls off my radar, and it could be because maybe he kind of doesn't always produce a ton of work. Like I don't know how many books he does a year, but he's great. And then it goes back to Bagley. Oh. So this is it. My last issue. Damn. Incredible. Really, really like for those about to rock, we salute you, Mark Bagley. All right, let's just do one more in the hundreds. Let's do 100. We'll celebrate 100 with him. Okay, and this is John Dell and Hesse. This is a nice cover. It's interesting. Wow, man, this is actually a really nice cover. It's the lighting that he did and everything. It's almost got like a little bit of a Bisley feel. the deeper shadows, man, that is really, really cool. That is a great cover. Oh man, dude, that is so sick. This is what Todd should have done for 300. He needed something a little more wild. Man, get out of here. Dude, that is awesome. So this is interesting. So this is Bagley and then Eisenov, which I wonder if this was colored over the pencils or if Bagley inked this himself. This is a great piece. Man, I like that a lot. That is really cool. God dang. It looks fun to draw, too. Especially someone that draws Spider-Man as well as he does. I wouldn't be able to do something this good. At least I don't feel I could, but that was great. This is nice, man. This is detailed. So this will be Dell and Hennessy. This would take a long time. This is getting kind of Michael Golden-y right here. Black checkered tiles and stuff like that. They're not monthly friendly, I'll tell you that, unless you've got an assistant filling in blacks or Clip Studio. I have to use that as a caveat now, but I know a lot of people ink digitally. It's like, I ain't mad at it. It makes sense. If we're expected to do this like level of detail in a month, something's got to give, because look, I have a ton of respect for Jack Kirby and John B. All those guys are incredible artists, but the level of detail that is sort of expected the last 20, 30 years in comics is a little bit more intense. It was funny, I actually think I said in the other video that I did for Patreon that I think, honestly, someone like Jack Kirby, if Clip Studio would have been around then, I think he totally would have used it. That might, I don't know, is that controversial to say that? I really do believe that he would have. I don't see why not, because he really seemed more into producing the comic book stories than worrying about sort of other stuff. I could be wrong. What do you guys think? Would Kirby have used Clip Studio if it would have been available? It's a tough question. This is nice. This is a very, very detailed issue, but it is issue 100. You always got to bring it on those landmark issues. Love this character. Man, that thing is so cool. This is quite detailed, too. Bagley is a baller, man. The guy's got stamina. This almost looks a little like Dean White colors. Dean gets pretty textury over John Romita Jr. when he colors them. These are gnarly. This is like, yeah, this is like your writer is just like, guess how many panels are going to be on this 2-page spread? You're like, oh, shit, here we go. All right, we're going to wrap this up. You all have a great day, and please recommend more monthly artists. This is completely fascinating to me, and I think for a lot of people out there that want to tell stories, you know, in comic books, that you know, more than like one book a year, we need to understand this stuff and what it takes. This is cool, man. This is a very detailed issue. I have a lot of respect for the inkers on this one too, in particular, because this is a lot of work. This looks like Dell to me. John's slick, man. Dude is really good. So solid. Man, that is awesome. Wow. Whoa, cool. Okay, all right, you all have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Please smash the like if you can, and that's about it. Check out my Patreon if you want. Bye.